The End of Everything by Plenty. The End of Everything from 2015. Welcome back to Hybrid Theory. I'm Aurian Archive, and this is about the Carnage. Once again, we've opened up on Ascent, but this isn't necessarily about the game. I've just from practical experience from the last live stream done. I'm now working entirely off of my Ryzen 3200 laptop, and it is so much happier when it's being fed an external source through the EVGA XR1 video capture device. So, to have something on in the background, I've started up the Ascent, and for some strange reason, despite it being a twin stick shooter, it's actually kind of relaxing to play, and I've needed a little bit of relaxation. And where this story starts is, well, a couple weeks ago. A couple weeks ago, I got sent to a renal specialist. The renal specialist ordered sonic imagery ultrasounds from a radiology firm, and according to the radiology firm, I only have one kidney. I mean, not that I have one functioning kidney, I only have one kidney, as there's no physical sign, no detectable sign of a second kidney. Without doing exploratory surgery, there's no good way to confirm whether or not I was just born without two kidneys. Because of that, I guess you could say I've to been lightly distracted is probably an understatement. And to say I've been depressed is probably also an understatement. It's finding out that the medicines you're on and the workout regime that you're on are literally the only things maybe keeping you alive are kind of a sobering moment. And it's probably because I've just been distracted and been. This is kind of something I don't want to talk about. I don't want to let other people know what's going on with me. I don't want other people to know that I'm a test subject for that I'm basically being used as a guinea pig, for lack of better words, because I'm some kind of unique little snowflake. Well, whatever. Uh, and because I'm just been so distracted, I've been having several different doctor's appointments and trying to get a handle on, well, what do the numbers actually look like? Uh, am I actually a candidate for a kidney transfusion? How is the one kidney I have, how is it actually faring? And the kind of good news among all of that is that the kidney I do have appears to be working fine. It's the numbers are coming down. The toxin levels are coming down without having to be manually filtered out through a dialysis. Uh, and as I said, just been distracted. So last Wednesday, and one of the City of Heroes servers that I'm on does a Rick the Mothership raid every Wednesday night and does one every Sunday. We're about to be starting it in about half an hour or so. So I'm gonna try and get this stream wrapped up before then. I'm going to try and run both chart two accounts on a single laptop. So this may not go well performance wise. Uh, but last Wednesday and gotten home just kind of out of it, and my primary computer was completely off, powered down. And I didn't think much of it because Windows 10 installing updates will occasionally just turn the computer off and won't turn it back on. But when I hit the power button, there wasn't any response. Okay, we've had thunderstorms rolling through. The next logical conclusion is to trip something somewhere. So it's unplug the computer, unplug the power supply, turn the power strip off, uh, give the capacitors time to drain, and then turn it back on, and everything came up as expected. Great. So went through the Wednesday night mothership raid, didn't have a single problem. I didn't think much more of it. Next morning when I woke up, the computer was off again, and I just went kind of screw it. I'll deal with it when I get back. Well, when I got back, started trying to get the computer to turn on, it wouldn't turn on. And so we'll go ahead and just bring up the first picture here, the Carnage. Uh, and to explain what's going on is uh, in a previous live stream, admitted that because of my hubris, chutzpah, ego, I was playing cute with my media server, and I was just adding software, turning it into a full production studio for doing streams, for doing gaming, for having editing software on there. And I'd actually ran out the root drive every time the root drive root partition tried to update. It was running out of space. It was running out of the amount of space that I had allocated it. I've ran into this problem before, so most of the time I just pop a live CD in or boot from a USB stick, resize the drive, and move on. Well, the media server computer has an NVIDIA graphics card, and NVIDIA graphics cards, in previous experience, lock up and lock out the X session on Linux systems. The drivers are terrible. I'm sorry, NVIDIA's not the graphics guru you think they are. They're not really that good. Because I had been using the media server for practical streaming for all of the Steam Deck live examples of the Steam Deck and what to expect and how it could work. I had actually run into a lockout problem with the NVIDIA. It had been behaving, so when I booted from the USB's drive, I didn't think much of making sure that there was, that I had time to babysit the computer and make sure that it completed all of the drive reallocation as expected. Because I just set it up and left to go to work, go to doctor's appointments, and come back. When I came back, the X session was locked out. Computer was keyboard, mouse, screen non responsive. Not unusual for NVIDIA cards, it's entirely common. But I knew that I still had an operation running in the background, so I gave it enough time, or at least I thought I gave it enough time before I hard restarted the computer, and then it wouldn't boot up to. Well, it would boot up to the login screen, indicating that the account information is still there, but then it would just loop back to the login screen whenever I tried to log into my account. So I something went wrong. I hadn't determined which, and as I was streaming about this and talking about this, I had an offer from someone who uh, I built a computer for, where they offered to buy me a new drive. And uh, admittedly, knowing I was distracted, knowing could have taken things out of context, gonna wait a couple days and then check back and see, okay, were you actually serious about, buying me a solid state drive? I, making sure I hadn't like misunderstood something. And in the intervening days between that offer and letting things sort out in my head, making sure I hadn't misunderstood something, is when my primary computer, I call it ticked off Southern Sledgehammer, failed over. Now, ordinarily, this would not be a problem because I always try to keep a backup power supply on hand. I've had enough power supply fail on me over the years that, well, when Corsair had run a refurbished sale on the AX860i, I grabbed one, and it's there in the picture. And at the same time, I'd already pre-made, and this is kind of what's going on in the picture, just all of the Carnage together at once. Where since I haven't checked back to see if the offer on the solid state drive was a serious one, I've uh, pulled out my backup plan of using a much older Serial A TA solid state drive as the boot install root location for the media server. Uh, and I haven't gotten around to doing that because, well, I've had other things to deal with. I mean, started a video, I, I like I said, I don't want to talk about it, but suddenly realizing that I could actually need a kidney transfusion is kind of the thing that really will take your mind off everything else and make it hard to focus. It really is. Um, Hopefully I won't need one. Hopefully the I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to think about it, but it's a factor. It's kind of like the mountains sitting in the middle of the roadway. And give me a second while as I said, there's a raid starting up, and the stream frame may have just dropped as I rotate back and forth between desktop sessions. Alright, so the AX860i. I pulled it out of its box. I've bought refurbished Corsair before. I've never had a problem with them. This one I did have a problem with. As soon as I plugged it in, put the cables in, and flipped it on, the computer ticked off Southern Sledgehammer, the one on the left here, with the massive golden heatsink, or brass heatsink, copper heatsink. I'm not sure what you would call that color. That's actually a Noctua super air cooler. Uh, it flicked back on. It responded, indicating that the problem was actually the RM750 power supply had just failed over. But the AX860i, well, it just kept looping into a restart state and clicking. So although the system powered up, it wasn't going any further because something's wrong with the power supply. Because it's a refurbished, and I honestly don't remember how long ago I got it, there's probably no warranty on it, and I'm still tossing whether or not I want to contact Corsair and ask them, is this something that's fixable, or is this an actual problem? Is the AX860i just dead out of the box? I mean, if it is, I didn't really pay that much for it, so I'm not going to cry too much. Uh, and so that's kind of, from there, it kind of, thinking about, okay, where do I go from here? And the immediate conclusion I kind of came to is I'm going to have to take everything out of that's a Silverstone SG10 on the left case, and that's an Anoxia deep silence case on the right. Now I like the and I went to a previous live stream. I like the Anoxias, I really do, but uh, because they're based in California, they're they're having to comply with some ludicrous restrictions. They're not able to make the product that they've made before. Uh, Nanoxia, as a premier case designer, really isn't or at least the products that they're listing on the website now, the ones you can actually get, are don't look that good, and the ones you'd actually want to buy are hideously expensive in the aftermarket. Since then, because of the aforementioned customer who commissioned me to build a computer for them, I really I really was impressed with the with the Be Quiet super air cooler, which I in testing found to be almost, if not as good, just as good, but maybe possibly even better in a certain configuration than the Noctua. Uh, I really liked the Dark Base 700 case. It was very easy to work with, very streamlined, and that kind of influenced, as I went to in a previous live stream, I really prefer micro ATX cases and micro ATX motherboards, uh, because I like having computers that are easy to manage and work with and carry with. If I've got to get up and get across country for a contract, a micro ATX chassis gives me all the power that I want, and you could even get for a while dual SLI and dual Crossfire in micro ATX formats. You could get very good systems in micro ATX and have a really tiny chassis. The SG10 is a really good micro ATX chassis. The problem is the motherboard manufacturers aren't making good micro ATX motherboards, at least for AMD processors. I don't really pay attention to Intel because, well, let's be honest, nobody paying attention to Intel right now unless it's the Arc GPU, in which case, well, everyone's paying attention to that, really hoping that the 199 US dollar Arc GPU punches a hole in the 379 Radeon RX 6600 XT, which is way overpriced and way under spec for a price point. And yeah, I've already had live stream on why 1080 HD is the domain of the mobile device, not the domain of the expensive desktop computer. Okay, so coming back to what, what my initial plan is right now, and we'll bring up the next picture. And I've already ordered this. I put BHP Video does offer a credit system of their own, so this is through BHP's credit. I think is actually backed by Synchrony, same people who do Amazon Store Credit and Newegg Store Credit. Uh, I've picked up Be Quiet Dark power supply. It was in stock, and a little bit more money than I really had wanted to spend on a power supply right now, but I've got a Gears promotional financing to get it paid off. I also picked up Gigabyte B55M Oros motherboard. Uh, I really thought about going with an ATX X57S, the die shrunk respin that doesn't have an active cooling component, simply because that means it's going to probably have a longer life. It, if you've had motherboards that have an active cooling component, generally at some point, like in 5 years, you probably have to replace the uh, fan, or at least traditionally in the past. AMD, I know that AMD's quality control for motherboard designers was a little more stringent, and having worked with a couple X570 launch boards, I'm pretty confident in saying most of those cooling solutions were adequate for a high-end board. Uh, but since I was kind of on a budget here, kind of trying to spend not that much money, and the motherboard I've been using was a B450 Aurus motherboard. Just go ahead and coming back to the Carnage picture on ticked off Southern Sledgehammer. Uh, there is an RO B450 in there, but it only has one M.2 slot. So if you're trying to transfer M.2 SSD data, not really functional for that, I guess I could say. And 1 second, because the warm up has started for the raid. Oh, this is going to be agony. Okay. And I expect the frames per second to be dropping because this is all running off of one platform. Alright. Okay, let's head back. Swap session, and there we are. Okay, so the B5, I kind of, it's sort of like, I guess the best way I can put it is, I'm not sure I trust the motherboard now. In that I know that I had a power supply failure. I don't think the processor or memory were affected. I don't think there's any problems there. At least since they did power up on a different power supply, even if it started faulting over immediately. I don't trust the B450 motherboard right now. So I kind of probably go ahead and replace it now. So again, lowballing it. We'll see how well the B55 works. And the last thing is, I did go ahead and go for a Be Quiet Dark Base 700 case chassis. Again, I really like the one I worked on before, uh, and as much as I like because the micro ATX motherboard market for AMD processors is not being serviced by any vendor at all. I mean, there's no vendor that's making a good micro ATX X5070 board, and from what I'm hearing, there's nobody who has a good board in pipeline for the X670, the next chipset, to come with the next series of AMD processors, Zen 4. Because of that, I do want to have the option to, if I have money or somebody offers to send me an X570S or an X670 motherboard, and I can say, yes, I do have a chassis I can put it in. And that kind of comes back to, I guess, one of the other issues at hand is uh, sometimes there's no polite way to say things, you just say it, but a few years back, I decided to make an effort at not being an absolute slob and a pack rat and stop hoarding all of the computer components I had ever come across and that nobody else was using because at some point somebody's going to need this. So my part of that was predicated by having to sell off all of my high-end equipment back in when I was down in Orlando going for a degree in a hell school, and kind of going, I I have too much junk. I need to get rid of it. I'd really like to bring a girl home and not be completely embarrassed by the fact that there's uh, an IBM ATX chassis from 1989 that still has a working Cyrix processor in it. I may have my dates mixed up. For actually, that may have when you've had so many chassis like that, it's going like throw it away. So a lot of the fallbacks that I may have had in the past where I can just throw these components into another system, test these components more thoroughly, make sure they work, just been throwing them out. And right now, my part of my current moving plan forward is I still have the DFI Lamparty Jr. and the i7 920 engineering sample that Intel sent me a few years back. So my current plan is I'm going to move the Intel board into the SG10 uh, and look for, if Corsair can help me do something about the AX860i, maybe get it to where it doesn't reset all the time, um, or replace it. I don't know what my options are. They're going to be there. Maybe bringing up the Intel system and have it as a backup because it was still perfectly functional as a processor when I retired it. It just was being outperformed by everything else that I had. Uh, and as I still kind of do like having that opening it up, and this is an Intel processor with 16 threads. And if you're running heavily thread aware applications, the i7 920, those old i7s are actually still incredibly performant under modern Linux systems. Not necessarily Windows systems, but on a Linux system, the old i7 basically anything with Intel's re-envisioned core hyperthreading. If you have a proper multi-threading aware application, they're still really good at those. Maybe not as good, maybe definitely not as good as Ryzen, but if you've got an older Intel i7 uh, with that with the core hyperthreading, the re-envisioned hyperthreading, it's not actually that bad performer, at least in my experience. I mean, that may have changed with the most recent Ryzen processors, where like the recent Ryzen APUs, you may get enough performance out of it that this is sort of part of me is nostalgia, and part of me is I know the 920 was still working. I just need memory for it, which is another thing. I think it needs DDR3, and I know the triple channel never really worked on that motherboard, so all I have to do is worry about picking up two sticks. All right, we are coming up 157, so I need to focus back on the raid, but that's kind of the little update on why I'm suddenly working off of the laptop for the streaming. Uh, what my immediate plan is to get back up and running with a functional computer system, or at least functional desktop. If What I can do in a short term to at least get the media server back up and working, so at least I have that to work with. And, if you're into the prayer list thing, or you're into the tell other people about this person has a serious problem, well, now it's kind of out there. Um, and no, I know this came up. Someone was, am I looking for a kidney donor? And no, not yet. The prognosis is not you need a donor in the next 6 months. The prognosis is not you need a donor in the next 6 years. The prognosis right now is let's get the chemicals down, let's get the toxins down, and then we'll go from there. So kind of like the computer systems is one step at a time, work things through, be a little bit more thorough in paying attention to the small details. And if I've been maybe a little bit more observant, I might have noticed that the power supply was going, or potentially an issue. I'm not sure how I would have noticed other than paying attention to the system not turning on. But again, that's why I normally try to keep backup power supplies. Again, this has been Aurian Archive with a rather odd hybrid theory, and hopefully I'll be back later to play some more Ascent, which will hopefully be less disturbing than this stream.